West Indies Cricket, Caribbean Cricket Podcast. West Indies Cricket, Caribbean Cricket Podcast.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. I'm one half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, Machel St. Patrick Hewitt, and we've got a special one today. This is something I should do more often, and it begs the question why. I think we used to do this back in the early days of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, and we certainly need to bring it back more often. So, obviously, we've done the videos on the West Indies Test squad, the West Indies Test captain. Santoki and I previewed the Test series ahead. But what we haven't got is the view from the opposition. So as you can see from the thumbnail for this particular episode, I've called it The View from Oz. And I think it is important and pertinent to get a view from an Australian fan in terms of what their expectations are of their own team. Forget the West Indies almost in this, but just how does an Australian cricket fan currently view their own side? We're so used to Australia winning everything that when they lost the World Test Championship to South Africa a couple of weeks ago at Lord's, the reverberations around the cricket world were huge, right? And well done to South Africa, but it means now that Australia come into this Test series against West Indies not as the World Test champions, and actually off the back of the miracle at the Gabba when we drew the series 1-1. So, I mean, does the miracle continue? Do West Indies have any kind of chance against this Australian side? Are the Australians smarting from their defeat in the World Test Championship final? Will they take it out on us? Do they just care about the Ashes? So many different questions to consider and ponder. But check this out. I've got a very, very special guest who's coming on. And not just are they coming on the show, they're actually in the Caribbean right now, in Barbados, ready. The first test starts on Wednesday. What day is it today? Monday. 2 days away. The first test starts in Barbados. This guest is in Barbados right now, was here in London for the World Test Championship final. So he's actually seen just as many L's as West Indies in recent times. But he's in Barbados hoping to catch a W for Australia. He's a long-time supporter and follower of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. So it's my pleasure to introduce Jono Haylen, who will be, like I say, at the Test match in Barbados. So he's joining us live from Barbados right now. We're going to talk all things Australia ahead of the first Test between the West Indies and Australia. Jono, how you doing?
Very well, Bash. How are you doing?
Very, very good, thank you. Excited to have you on. A pleasure to have you on. And like with anybody that I know through the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, I don't know the first time we started talking, but I do know it's been a while now.
It has been a while. You sort of get lost in a few years when it's online presence and one series rolls into the other. But yeah, it's sort of nice that sort of all the paths have sort of led together with myself having a dream holiday here in the Caribbean. And as you can see, I'm an Australian cricket fan, but not necessarily a flag waver for the Australian cricket team. I do respect them and love them, but as you can see by my jersey, a W for the West Indies would not upset me whatsoever. It would be great for the game.
Do you know what? Let's start there actually, because and actually maybe we need to rewind it back to the Gabba,
right? Because
when we won, and by we, obviously I'm talking about the West Indies, when we won at the Gabba at the start of 2024, there very much was that feeling in Australia of, you know what, this is actually good for the game. And as much as it's an L and it's West Indies' first win in 29 years and so on and so forth, actually because of the nature of that victory, it kind of felt like the Australian cricketing public was like, yeah, we'll take that one. We'll take that because it's actually good for the game. What was your feelings on that Gabba defeat for Australia?
Oh, the defeat. Well, even Pat Cummins, the captain, in the press conference afterwards was sort of like, what a bloody good game of cricket that was. Good on the West Indies. And there are certain factions in the Australian media, right wing, who just despise Pat Cummins, so they tore him down. But it was a real, this is really good to see. Shamar Joseph, just, that was an inspirational performance, and nobody was feeling bad about that series draw. Like usually, if Australia were to just draw a series on home soil, heads need to roll, and there could be even a big, report. Get a few ex-judges in. It's been done in the past after losing in Ashes. So, but everyone sort of thought, oh yeah, good on the West Indies, and I think maybe the vibe was, well, that's a bit of a one-off, a bit of an anomaly. And I guess in a way it was because, as I've heard from this program before, West Indies weren't necessarily back after that. It was a great performance and one to be celebrated, but it wasn't, okay, well, now we're going to win the World Test Championship final. It was about building blocks. But, the feeling at home was end of the summer, and it was a fun end to it. So, there wasn't real much negative reverberations there.
So we fast forward then, nearly a year and a half since then, and you were just at Lords. And actually, let's talk about that, the Lords experience. You're kind of on a once in a lifetime trip here. First to Lords, never been to Lords before, and then on to the Caribbean to see the Test match in Barbados. So the home of cricket, as people call it, at Lords, and then the Mecca of the Caribbean in Barbados. You can't really get much better than that. But first, let's talk about Lords. What was the experience again as an Australian fan? Because I just assumed Australia going to win this. South Africa will give them a good fight, but Australia going to win this. And there's been plenty of, there hasn't been that feeling you just described after the West Indies defeat. This one feels like there's been far more recrimination. Like Aussies, massive generalization, but Aussies aren't used to losing, right? And it feels like there's been massive recriminations about what does this mean. We've seen that Labuschagne's paid the price, he's out. But what was the feeling like as the final was unfolding at Lords?
Yeah, as it's unfolding, South Africa just brought it home beautifully. And I think from what I've heard from several Australian voices, if the Ashes weren't coming up at the end of this year, I think there would have been a little bit of a mass clean out to sort of set up for a World Test Championship cycle. However, whilst that's important, not that I agree with it entirely, but the Ashes is a big deal for both Australia and England, and they really invest a lot of their planning surrounding an Ashes cycle as opposed to a WTC cycle. But because of not wanting to have a whole lot of rookies essentially playing in an Ashes, they kind of need to stick with, well, they haven't stuck with Labuschagne. They have given him a rest for the time being. But maybe say an Usman Khawaja, I think maybe he might not have been picked for the West Indies series if it weren't an Ashes coming up. So, I think when it comes to selection, it's sort of based around the Ashes and not WTC. But I think a lot of people would have liked some change. But then what do you do? Sometimes you just get beat, and that can be okay.
Yeah. So I mean, remember, because ultimately the World Test Championship is a one-off game, right? And not that I'm trying to make excuses for anybody, but
no.
Okay, so let's say Australia plays South Africa in a 3-match series in England. Let's just say that's how the World Test Championship final actually is played. You probably are right then to bank and say Australia win that more often than not, right? But in a one-off game, anything can happen, right? And South Africa performed at the key moments and got the job done. Now, you mentioned Labuschagne. He's the main headline in terms of the person paying the price, right?
Yes.
For this West Indies series. 2 questions about Labuschagne. 1, do you think it was right to drop him? 2, do you think he'll be back by the Ashes?
Oof, good question. I think something needed to change, and the key factor with that was Sam Constas,
right?
Who set Boxing Day on fire. He basically gave the best Boxing Day entertainment we've had in my lifetime where he was ramping Jasprit Bumrah on Test debut on Boxing Day. And then they rested him for Sri Lanka because they were sort of looking forward to an Ashes planning for him. And so playing in Sri Lanka with the spinning wickets could only do one thing, and that would be he might have a bit of trouble there. Confidence goes down, potentially. Just speculating there. And because of that one-off game that you mentioned that the WTC was, they basically wanted to play with their tried and tested, battle-hardened players who I think Australia thought they'll just get the job done. You know, the guys who have been around for a long time will just get the job done. And that kind of bit them a little bit, because maybe if they did have a Constas in that team, because they basically didn't trust him for the occasion. They trusted him to bat against Jasprit Bumrah on Boxing Day when the Border Gavaskar Trophy was alive. It was one test all with India with, you know, one hand on the trophy because they were holding it at the time. So they trusted him with that. But maybe at Lords he could have played a blinder. Look, you never know. That's the beauty of cricket, isn't it? We can all go, if this happened, that happened, whatever. But so I think the idea was always going to be, come first test in the Caribbean, Constas was going to play. And so for him to come in, somebody had to come out. And so in a way, that WTC was almost like not an audition, but whoever did not perform well. And it was probably out of Labuschagne was already in a little bit of strife, potentially Khawaja, although I love Usman Khawaja. I never want him to retire. But so yeah, that it just had to happen to fit Constas in, because I think they see him as the opener with Khawaja for the Ashes. For the Ashes.
Do you think Labuschagne was set up to fail though by asking him to open in the World Test Championship final? It's not his position.
It's not, and he's been a great number 3, but quite often there's been some pretty good opening partnerships that Labuschagne has come in at, 1 for 90, 1 for 100. A bit like the opposite to your prediction for the West Indian number 3, whoever they have in there this week, where you're like, oh, well, they might as well pick a third opener. They'll be in there, within. But yeah, look, he's got a really good work ethic, and from what I've sort of seen around the traps, he's in the nets at Kensington now, working really hard. So he's not beaten down about it. He's a hard worker, but but you would feel a bit harsh getting asked to open the batting for the first time at Lords. Yeah, you're going to nick them occasionally, aren't you? And to then get told on your bike, yeah. So yeah, if I were Marnus, you'd be like, yeah, it's a bit of a tough beat, that one. But he was already on the back of not the best of runs, and I think they may have just put him in that opening position to maybe give him another. Maybe that was his opportunity to redeem. But hard when you're out of position, though, Mash. But but they've got Cameron Green, who batted number 3, didn't do much as well. Great young player, but they're big on him. So we've got 2 very tall batters in our top 6 with Bo Webster and Cameron Green.
It's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned Cam Green, because obviously with Steve Smith having, I can't remember what the injury was. What did he do again? Did he fracture?
Oh, yeah.
Something happened to his finger. I think he fractured it or broke it or whatever it might be.
Oh, yeah.
And it looked bad on camera. Now, Smith obviously is out as well, which means that Australia's top 6 is likely to be Khawaja, Constas, Green.
Yep.
I don't know if Inglis will be 4, Head 5, Bo Webster 6, right?
Could be Inglis at 5.
What?
That's where 4? He batted in Sri Lanka. Oh yeah, good point. That's right. Yeah, no, they will put they could put Inglis at 3 even. I'm not too sure what the makeup of that top order is, because a lot of people are, because of that Steve Smith not being that rock at 4. I think you've got to keep Travis Head at 5, because he does turn games in that position.
Exactly. That's why I left him there at 5.
No,
but then
good.
I guess the point I'm making is, when I hear, and I mean this respectfully, I'm saying this about the number one team in the world, South Africa notwithstanding, right?
Yep.
I hear Kawaja, Constus, Green, Inglis, Head, Webster, and I say, yeah, that's not that special. now, hear me out. Obviously, people say no, Mash. English did well when he got his debut, and they'll say Constant was ramping Bumrah when he was playing, and Green is no slouch, and Kawaja might be on a bit of a decline now, but he's still Kawaja. Head can basically win a test match in a session. Webster looks like he's adapted well, but put as a West Indian, and with pure West Indian bias in my mind, I look at that top six and say, we might not get a weaker top six than that. And I mean weak relative to what you expect from an Australian top six. If West Indies wanted to compete at home against Australia, they couldn't ask for a weaker top six in terms of relative experience. Correct. Or relative experience, or because it's very inexperienced. Because remember, Australia haven't been there for 10 years. So inexperience, not only inexperience in general, in the likes of Constance, Inglis, Webster, but most of them ain't been to the Caribbean in terms of playing Test cricket in the Caribbean. Do you think I'm being too optimistic there?
I do love the optimism. No, but I've felt the same thing, Match, where whilst the top six that will play on Wednesday for Australia are incredibly great cricketers, in contrast to past Australian top sixes where, okay, you get Matthew Hayden out walks Ricky Ponting, and then you get Ricky Ponting out comes Mark Waugh, you get him out come. The West Indies aren't contending with that right now. It is, whilst they are all very capable, and look, given I always get a bit optimistic on the eve of a West Indies-Australia series, and I think all the Australian players seem to hit really good form when they're up against the West Indies. And that could be like a thing from, when they were growing up, because that's when Australians would really fire up and rise because they had to. Otherwise, the Windies would kill them. So, yeah, I think it's not harsh at all because when I say vulnerable, potentially vulnerable, but they are potentially the most vulnerable I've ever seen an Australian top six. However, in 48 hours from now, they could put 400 on day one. You just don't know because they are all capable. But geez, if you're the West Indies bowling attack, you would be thinking we are a chance here. If they can get on top, they could really stay on top because you don't have that Steve Smith to have a generational series or something like that. Someone may. I'm not trying to predict Australia will get rolled for under 200, but if it were ever going to happen, this could be the chance.
That's my point.
This is the opportunity.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now, of course, as much as I say that, there is a caveat, right? Of course, this is Australia we're talking about, and West Indies, and I mean this with the greatest of respects to the West Indies team, we have plenty of times in the past got better teams than this current Australia side. I don't know, 100 for 5. And then we've let the pressure, like we've loosened the pressure, and 100 for 5 has turned into 350 for 8. If you see what I mean. And when I look at someone like Alex Carey coming in at number 7, again, to me, he's not Travis Head, but he has the ability to score quickly and turn what looks like a perilous situation actually into an advantage Australia. So I think as much as I look at the top 6 and say, West Indies could get into them, it's not just about could they get into them. They're going to have to find a way to keep the pressure on. Because so it'll be Carey at 7, Cummins at 8, Stark at 9.
Coming off for 50 at Lords.
Yeah, exactly. So
we do
Australia
that.
Won't just hand it to us. 5 down, 4 down. They're not just going to hand the situation to the West Indies. And then of course, Jono, we look at the bowling attack, and the bowling attack writes itself. Here's the question I've got for the bowling attack. More so, we don't need to talk about Hazelwood, Stark, Cummins, and Lyon. We already know what they do, right? So we don't need to do any kind of deep dive on them. What I'm more intrigued about is, do you think any of them will get rested at any point? Or do you think it's a case of play your best team, but then against World Test Championship points. So do you think it's a case
and
of
away points,
play your best team at all times, or do you think they'll try to aim for 2-0 and then maybe, I don't know, a Scotty Boland gets in for the final test just to give someone a rest, or do you think it?
Yeah.
Or do you think, because I once spoke to Steve, was it Steve Harmison who said this to me?
Right. I
swear it was Steve Harmison who made this point to me. And he said, when somebody goes on tour as a squad player, you have no obligation to play. And he said you should always play your best team regardless. And you have you have no obligation to give a squad player a game just because. But how would you do it? Would you be trying to get some of those squad players a game time at some point in the Test series?
I think they would love to get Boland in there. I don't even know if he's on tour at the moment because they've got Kuhneman, the left arm spinner, as well.
Yeah.
So that could be an option, but I think possibly Josh Hazlewood is the one they are mostly concerned about breaking down all the time, and we know. And as much as they want to respect this series, because it won't be easy either. I think, given, not to dive too much into the West Indies side, but I think one thing Darren Sammy really provides is just some belief and that work hard, don't give in. And I think it won't be easy for Australia to potentially roll through. So I think, but with all respect with that, they are thinking ahead of the Ashes, and what they would not want is something you sort of mentioned. They play the third test in Jamaica as the same bowlers, and one of those bowlers, whether it's breaks down in Sabina Park if Australia are 2-0, and that's when there'd be backlash. Why did they play them when they got to be ready?
Right, exactly. So that's
the thing. Yeah,
you've kind of linked it to what my next point is.
Correct.
Because you said earlier on that actually Australia, much like England, have the Ashes in their forefront in terms of we are preparing for an Ashes. This is how we see the opening 11 for the first 11 for that first Test match versus England in the Ashes. Now, if that is the case, if somebody was to be carrying a niggle, do you think, therefore, like say Hazlewood, say the 4 that we expect plays the first Test. Now, let's just say Josh Hazlewood comes out of that first Test and he's like, feeling a bit of a slight injury here, can definitely play on it, but I'm just feeling it. Do you think that they would say, no, you're out?
Oh, I think, that'd be Scott Boland ready to go, who is a great bowler in his own right. What do they call it now that we get, you hear? It's, say a player has a something in their calf, it's called calf awareness or something along those lines now, hamstring awareness. So that look, they won't risk it. They will not risk that. So they may need to dip into those reserves. Australia are a finely drilled team, the way they prepare and there's a lot of sports science behind what they do now. So they should be right. But, they've come from London. They're here in the West Indies. Personally, for the good of the series, I just hope a few locals are hanging around the hotel, get them down to, the Oystons fish market one night, get the few rums into the boys, maybe get them off there. Maybe that's another approach, as a collective society in the Caribbean could say, all right, we can't take wickets or score runs, but we can sort of distract them, show them the good times.
Our equivalent of the fireworks outside the hotel.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Show the boys a good time. And before you know it, you've had 6 rums. And then once that's happened, well, let's have a 7th. You're out all night. And all of a sudden, they're not that robotic, athletic team. They're like cricketers from the 80s again, But look, that's dream stuff because, hotels got security. I'm sure they wouldn't let that happen, especially mobile phones. But, that's just having a bit of fun there, Mash, because there is a lot of fun here. But, So, in terms of resting and all that, look, I think they will want to play their best team because of the away WTC points as well. But I think, but sometimes that can get in a team's head because we all thought Australia were just going to roll through South Africa at Lords. It was almost going to be Australia, as opposed to playing the WTC, it was almost the feeling. And look, I fell into that trap match because South Africa didn't have the greatest cycles that they won, which sounds so funny. And just on a slight tangent, it is funny how in the last, probably since even in 1996 World Cup, they were up there as favourites, and Brian Lara killed them in the quarterfinal. And then 99, we all know what happened there. All these white ball tournaments, South Africa have been, pundits have said they should win it or get very close to winning it. And then the one time they do win a major ICC trophy, they weren't even on the radar, and they've won it. I just think that's just beautiful, and how lovely cricket can be sometimes. But and it was more a case of Australia are going to London to collect the WTC. That was my mentality.
Yeah.
And an arrogant one at that. I thought maybe they can play well. Like Aidan Markram, wow, he was great. Like that was a privilege to see that and the woman. But so they did that. They got beat. And maybe if there's that mentality, and this is getting a little bit, in the weeds on it, but when you think, if we win those first two tests, some of the quicks can have a rest in Jamaica, then you're already taking your mind off the job at hand right there.
Which is get the win in Barbados and then move on from there.
Get the win in Barbados, and rather than thinking about that, because I do know how well managed they are and how they probably would want to rest their fast bowlers and maybe even bring the spinner in, Kuhnemann, sorry. But yeah, it is interesting. But I think, look, the Australian mentality, and as you said, that they would want to get back on the winning trail as quickly as possible. So it'll injury pending, or unless look, the Australian coaching staff, they're happy to be a little bit more left of centre now and be happy to take a bit of criticism for the greater good. Who knows what they're thinking? There might be some tactical reasons why they might not play them, but if it's just a general normal condition, then it's Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins, Nathan Lyon, and they've sort of built that little fort there where they do pretty well. So I think that's what the batters will have to contend with for the West Indies.
A couple more questions, then we'll call this one to a close. If West Indies were to win, and now I hasten to add that when I say win, I don't mean win the series. I just mean win a game, right? So let's not even delve into any conversation about winning the series. Let's say West Indies were to win one of the test matches. How do you envisage that unfolding with the relative strength of the Australian side? In what circumstance? Like, would it have to be another Jamar Joseph broken toe freak scenario? Or can you see a more conventional path to a West Indies win in a test match? What would Australia have to do for West Indies to just conventionally win a test match with no superhuman, once-in-a-lifetime performance?
This could be a bold call. Given what we discussed earlier about this is not the Avengers of Australian batting all together at once. And I know it's this idea we often have as lovers of West Indies cricket. If the West Indies can just play to their potential, because I think that's sometimes a lot of the frustration in the region here is when you do have some remarkable players just not perform to their potential. But you look at the batting for the West Indies and even the bowling. If they play to their potential, which is really good, up against this, and let's just look at the bowling, for instance, from the West Indies, up against this, at the moment, vulnerable, moment, potentially fragile, it might not have to be that superhuman effort, Nash.
Yeah, no, do you know what? I hear where you're coming from.
It's not as mission impossible. And look, and once again, just to emphasise, yes, I am an Australian. I respect the current Australian team under Pat Cummins. Like, adore Pat Cummins as a human being. He is a wonderful person, and I support. I'm happy for their success. But from the West Indies perspective, it won't take that Jamar Joseph miracle to do it. And maybe I am being optimistic because
No. Do you know what? maybe your optimism has made me now get optimistic.
I have an effect, Mash. I am sorry. I don't want to bring you up and
No.
It could just.
What, though? I understand where you're coming from in this regard.
Yeah. Right.
If Warwican bowls as well as he bowled in, like I say, these are all freak scenarios, but let's just say it. If Warwican performs like how he performed in Pakistan, obviously that was on a raging turner, but let's say to his potential. If Jaden Seals continues on just his normal trajectory, if Alzari Joseph performs to his potential and Shamar Joseph bowls even half of what he did in the Gabba, then actually, and this before we mention Roston Chase doing his dibbly dobblies, right?
Yeah.
That what I just described, if they all played to their potential, would be enough to skittle Australia out for under 200, right? The question mark for me is West Indies batting, because it is rare that the Australian bowling lineup, the Fab Four, it is rare that they are unable to restrict a side. So if West Indies were to restrict Australia to under 200, you better believe that Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins and Lyon are going to restrict West Indies to under 200. So when you say plays to the potential, I reckon the only way West Indies win is if it's one of those low scoring type games, as opposed to I think over the piece, Australia are more likely to perform better after one bad innings than West Indies are. If you see where I'm coming from, so a low scoring game tends to equal up the playing field somewhat. So in that scenario, and so I guess I see it like this, Jono, for an improbable West Indies win, I see it like this. West Indies, all the players would have to perform to their potential in the West Indies side, and Australia would have to drop theirs by 5%. Because if Australia played to their potential, 99 times out of 100, they will win without a freak superhuman performance by a West Indian player. So it requires Australia to drop their percentage and West Indies to be at their absolute maximum. Is that harsh, or do you think that's fair enough?
No, I think that is fair enough. That is fair enough, where it doesn't have to be a dramatic drop for Australia. It's not one of those situations like, say, in when England won the Ashes in 2005. And, well, I don't know how many England fans are watching this, but, that team of, Hayden Langer and Shane Moore and Glenn McGrath, Ricky Ponting, they had to play. They all had to have, aside from Shane Moore, who was okay, they all had to have a shocker of a series, like an absolute terrible series, and England play out of their skin, and England just won. It doesn't have to be that dramatic this time around, though, Mash.
Yeah.
This West Indies side, and it's an exciting side. Cardi, King, Hope, those three get going. Momentum can really get them there, and with your Brathwaite's Chase can just anchor. But it's just funny. You had me thinking before when you were talking about if it's that bowling showdown rather than a war of attrition that goes over 5 days. You were just having me think about that. That could be the avenue to win the games, right? Based on two things, yes, just through cricket terms, but because West Indies don't play as much Test cricket as Australia, when the Test match does go deep into a day 4 or 5, the Australian team has that institutional memory and the muscle memory of turning up after 3 days of tough cricket and continuing
and not lagging, having the match fitness to I like what you said, muscle memory, to be like, right, it's day 4, lock in, this is what we're supposed to do. So correct, because and it only came to me, I've never thought of this, Mash, until you were talking about this bowling showdown type thing, and then I was thinking about Australia West Indies and how, just going back in recent times, when a team has matched it with Australia for 3.5 days of a Test match, and I start getting really excited, thinking, we could have a tie on our hands, or a Test that finishes so tightly in the last session of day 5. But then the team, possibly a Sri Lanka, South Africa, even, it happened in Australia when South Africa last year, they then sort of just deflate. And it's not a criticism of
those teams. But just playing 2 days of cricket back to back is hard. Turning up for a fourth at the elite level is hard, and Australia do it so many times. They play so much Test cricket,
and the problem is they play a 5-match Test series versus England and India, and that's high intensity cricket. And that's why I'm saying when West Indies got that miracle at the Gabba, yes, it was a high intensity performance, but that's why, without trying to be disrespectful, that's why it was seen as a one-off, because it's the weaker teams are unable to maintain that intensity day after day after day after day. That was
it, because the usual way it goes is Windies are matching it with Australia, and they might have a sniff, but then Australia, 99.9 times out of 100, what would have happened in that test is Australia passed that total 3-4 down, maybe.
Yeah.
But it did take on day, late, I think it was day 4 it finished.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it was day 4 it finished. Yeah, you don't see that. And that was what made it so special and memorable, and kind of took Australia by surprise, having a team who isn't one of the big three come in hard on day 4 of a test, especially a fast bowler. Of all the things in the game, you could maybe a leg spinner would pull something off, or an incredible century from a batter, but for a fast bowler, that was, so I've never looked at it from that perspective, Mash, and now I'm thinking, okay, West Indies, bowl first, get it done quickly, and just make it a shootout, and winner takes all on day 3 before lunch.
Well,
that's the avenue.
For those who've listened all the way through, there you have it. The West Indies path to victory has been laid out. I'll get in touch with Darren Sammy and ask him to get you into the camp, Jono. And it looks like we're all good to go. But listen, final thing, and then we'll call it a day.
Right.
Prediction. Santoki and I said 3. We said our heads say 3-0 Australia. I think I said my heart says that maybe West Indies could pull off a shock victory in one of the tests, but my head is still saying 3-0. What are you saying?
One thing I haven't checked is the weather.
Yeah, I haven't checked weather either, actually. Good point.
So I'm going to have a look at the weather, just because I've got an idea here, and I'm sort of basing this on the shorter like we spoke about, the shorter the game, the higher possibility of the West Indies getting the W. The shorter the series, right?
Yeah.
Well, look what happened last series. 2 test series, 1-1. So we've got windy, high chances of rain on Friday and Saturday. Okay, so look, what I was looking at, isn't it sad that I've come all this way to watch Test cricket, and I was just saying, geez, I hope the first test gets washed out. And so, in terms of this so look, what I would, it's a mix, isn't it? We know what we would like to see, but what we believe, and let's be realists here, and that's what we want to try to do, is, what we want to happen and what should happen. Look, I'm going to go bold here. I'm going to go 2-1 to Australia. Look, my heart would say 2-1 to the West Indies, but I think that would just be like crazy. Like let's try to. So I'll have a bet each way. Ideally, it's one of the first 2 tests, right? I think I heard you and Santoki mention the same thing. Like that would make the day-night test. Yeah, that's a big thing too. A day-night test match in Jamaica. Having that final test be a decider would be phenomenal. Because it's a little bit of a, if it's 2-0 going into Spina Park against 2-1. So look, I'm going to say 2-1. I'm going to say we will get one of those games to be that bowling showdown, and the West Indies just get the better of it. I'm going to stick to that, Mash, even though my brain is saying, oh, look, this Australian team should still win each test. But no, I also have a lot of respect for Darren Sammy as a coach. And I know he is not playing the game, but I think him with a new captain, Chase, who I think he will steady keep things steady. Brathwaite playing his 100th test too in Grenada. I'm really looking forward to that. It's a shame he's playing his 99th in Bridgetown. Would have been beautiful to have him do it at home. And then Cardi, King, Hope. I'm hoping they fire. And with that hope, I got to say, well, if I have hope in it, it's going to happen. Therefore, they can all come together just for one test. 2-1 to Australia.
Right. You heard it there first, people. 2-1. 2-1. Jono Haylen says it will be 2-1 to Australia. Listen, if West Indies manage to win one of these 3 tests, I'm the first to say it. We need to give them an open top bus parade around every single nation of the Caribbean to celebrate the one.
The one test, it could happen, Mash. It could be a celebration. Why not? And look, wouldn't it just make it a good summer? There's a lot of promotion around the place, and one of the sayings I've heard, full of energy. Let's hope that happens. And a win early would get the fans engaged, and more importantly, from an Australian perspective, it would just shake things up a bit, because usually in the last 3 tours, you wake up early in the morning, and the test matches. It's either just finished, the day's play is just finishing from the Caribbean, or has finished and Australia's winning by plenty. It'd be kind of nice for Australians to wake up and go, oh shit,
there's a game on here.
We got a test on here, and especially, and I hate going into that nostalgia shit, but some people go, this reminds me of 91, 95, even 1999, even to some extent 2003, and it could still happen, right? Yes, I know. Mash, I know I'm being incredibly optimistic. I understand that, but it's not the worst West Indies team here. And
listen, what would be the point in supporting the sports team if we didn't allow ourselves to believe that ultimately anything's possible? Nobody, again, I go back to the Gabba last year or the Test series last year, because we should all remember that West Indies went to Australia the year before that and got absolutely humiliated in the 2 test series, to the point where I remember the Australian administrators like, oh my God, we got West Indies coming back a year later as well. They're absolutely useless, right? And most of us predicted, we're going to just get hammered again, 2-0. And so... yes, you can call the Gabba result a freak result, but that's the whole point of sport. Anything is actually possible. And if we ever get into the mindset of there's no way West Indies can win a test, well, then what's the point in following a sport in the first place? But listen, Jono, you've been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I'm fairly certain people are going to say, Mash, make sure you get Jono back on at various different points. I'm toying with the idea of doing something after, I don't know if every day, but maybe every other day of the test match. So anyway, you and I are in communication, so we'll make something happen at the very least. But in the meantime, Jono, enjoy Barbados, enjoy the first test, and I'll be looking out for you. I'll be looking out for you in the crowd. Make sure you go in there with a CCP placard on cardboard.
Yeah, I'm regretting now not getting merch, Mash. I remember toying with it when I first joined up, but there was all the shipping and then too much happening when I was over in England because you were in Ireland and stuff. But look, maybe I'll just make my own. Why not? Like, you can get creative. We can get creative here. I'll make sure you notice it somehow. Maybe give a few frees to the people in the party stand. A bit of that sort of thing. But no, look, we'll be in touch, mate. And just as a little final one is it's a real privilege to be here. I get that, and it's beautiful part of the world. It's sort of like my cricketing spiritual home as well, to sort of live and breathe it now and to see it live. Really looking forward to it, Mash, and I'm sure many listeners feel the same way. Like, really excited and always feel that bit of something special a couple of days out from a West Indies Test match if you're around. So I don't take that lightly. I can understand to be in the present and go, this is a really cool moment. You don't get to come to the Caribbean every year. This is a once in a lifetime. So it's a beautiful thing, Mash, and we'll be in touch, and let's hope it's a good series, right?
No doubt. Listen, if there's anybody listening to this who's in Barbados and you're going to the test match any of the days, look out for Jono. Treat him nicely, people. Help him see the sights and sounds of Barbados that he may or may not have already seen. And Listen, Jono, thank you so much for coming on. Like I say, we'll touch base throughout the test series and get your views on what you've seen and so on and so forth. But, ladies and gents, that's been Jono Haylen. That's been the view from Oz in Barbados. And we look forward to, within 48 hours, the first test match between West Indies and Australia. Jono's full of energy. I'm full of optimism. And we'll see you very, very soon on the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Later.
West Indies Cricket, Caribbean Cricket Podcast.